Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm doing another one of my mini-series 8 that are great, and this time we're going to be talking about science fiction books. So sci-fi is something that I read semi-regularly, and I know that there are a bunch of subgenres in sci-fi, but I've just kind of grouped a load of things together into this one. Some of these are booktube darlings that you'll have heard about before, some of them I've never heard spoken about other than on my channel, and some of them are lesser known books of fairly popular authors. So we are going to jump straight in, and these are 8 sci-fi books that I think are pretty great. We're going to start off with the ones that I listened to on audiobook that I don't have physical copies of. The first one is Mem by Bethany C Morrow. This is a novella which is really fun and quirky, and it's playing around with a lot of concepts of personhood and like personal identity. The idea of this is we live in a world where traumatic or memories that you don't want to have anymore, whether it be because of trauma or just not wanting them in your head, you can actually get them removed, but then they create almost like a clone copy of you at that moment in your life that is doomed to keep reliving that particular memory. And there are basically institutions where these memories go to be taken care of until they sort of fade and pass away. Now, the story is told from the point of view of a memory who has her own identity and is able to form her own memories, which is something that none of the other memories can do. And she sort of has taken on a life of her own. And it's a conversation about whether she counts as a person and would you remove memories if you had the opportunity. I think this is really great if you're fans of like the movie The Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind, or if you're really into kind of philosophical thought experiments. I think it's really fun and quirky, and it's a cute little novella. I personally could have done with a little bit more from it. I think it would have been good to go further, but it holds its own quite strongly. The next one is a massive booktube darling that was very popular about 2 years ago, and that is the Themis Files by Sylvian Neuvel. I have a whole book review on this that I'll link down below, but this is a sci-fi trilogy that is set on our planet and is about a mysterious robotic hand that is discovered buried underneath the earth, and then the ramifications from that. It's really cool in audiobook form because it's told entirely from like the perspective of kind of reports and interviews and sort of found footage style stuff rather than a traditional narrative form in a book, and I just think it's really cool. I really like all the characters. I think the full cast of the audiobook does very well for that, and it really is playing around with some very cool ideas of like ends justify the means, and it's also overlaid with a lot of science and physics and linguistics and a lot of very cool techie stuff. So if like me you're a little bit of a nerd, this one should be right up your street. I personally like the whole trilogy. I think it ended really strong. I know some people disagree with the last book, but I personally really liked it, and like I said, I'll link the review down below if you want more of my thoughts on the entire trilogy as a whole. Now let's talk about some of the books that I actually like physically read. The first one is Hold Back the Stars by Katie Khan. This one is kind of strange and is more a book that you read because of the ideas it's playing with than necessarily because it's a particularly strong plot or because it ends particularly satisfyingly. I think it's doing a lot and it doesn't necessarily do all of it very successfully, but I think it's very interesting in what it is doing. So this is set in a world where we have kind of a utopia where people are rotated around different settlements based on your age and kind of what you're expected to be doing in that age. So it's a dystopia kind of disguised as a utopia, and the idea is that in your early 20s you should be meeting lots of new people and rotating around, and you shouldn't be really settling down. But in this there is a couple who meet and they really want to stay together, so they have to petition to be able to do that basically like 5 years earlier than what the government says that they should. And to kind of test run this on whether they can make this relationship last so early on in their life, they actually get sent to a space station to kind of play out this experiment. But something goes wrong on the space station and the book opens with them in jeopardy. Now, if that sounded a little bit quirky and crazy, you're completely right. It's all over the place, this book, but I think that the stuff it's doing with the dystopia utopia idea of like what is kind of the plan of somebody's life and where should you be at certain points, it's really fun and interesting, and it does some cool multiverse timeline stuff at the end. So I've got a lot of time for it, even if it wasn't the most satisfying of books, and not many people talk about this one anymore. So I think if you're a fan of like weird sci-fi that's really playing with lots of like funky ideas, I think you'll enjoy it. The next one is a huge booktube darling, and that is A Close and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. This is book 2 of the Wayfarer series, but they are disconnected, like you can read them in any order, and this one is my favourite of the trilogy, although I believe there's a 4th one coming out soon. They're all really strong, but this one really holds a special place in my heart. The Wayfarer series is kind of a classic space opera style sci-fi set across a huge galaxy with lots of different aliens, and book one kind of follows a crew. It's got a very Firefly kind of feel. Great book, but this one is actually focused on an artificial intelligence who gets her own body, which is technically illegal, and it's really again playing around with conversations of like what makes somebody human, what makes somebody a person, are those two things different? And it's about her trying to find her place in the world, alongside kind of a collection of fun characters who are also trying to track down somebody from their past. I really love this book. I love Becky Chambers' writing. It's kind of cozy sci-fi. It's not got the very sort of dramatic space opera style stuff, but it's got that real space setting, and I think that she's really wonderful. But this one in particular, I really like conversations about what does it mean to be a person. I don't know if you picked up on that yet. It's kind of a recurring theme in a lot of my sci-fi, and I have a whole video talking about personhood, identity and self through fiction, which I'll link down below, but this one really holds a special place in my heart. Then we have one that was hugely hyped at the beginning of the year, and that is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone and Amal El-Mohtar. This is a fun, weird sci-fi novella. It is a time travel one, and it's about two warring factions who are trying to help their side to win through tweaking timelines across multiple universes, but then there's a forbidden love story through it. It's beautiful, and it's really the kind of sci-fi that isn't interested in giving you particularly much world building or really holding your hand through any of it. It sort of dumps you in the middle and leaves you to sort of flounder and work out what the rules of this world are, and you kind of get to the end not fully understanding it, but kind of feeling like you experienced something beautiful that you're not really too sure what happened, but you know that it was an amazing journey kind of thing. It's really good if you are the kind of person who enjoys your sci-fi being a little bit more drop you in the middle of it and less hand-holding. I loved this. I thought some of the language was stunning, the imagery in it is beautiful, the love story is absolutely stunning between these two women. It's just, yeah, generally was a spur of the moment Kindle pick that I then ended up just is one of my favorite books of this year. Very, very, very cool. Then we have Artemis by Andy Weir. This is from the author of The Martian, which is very much his more popular one. This came afterwards and is about when human beings have settled on the moon, and there is like a kind of colony there, and it's about a woman who lives on the moon, but there's some kind of crime has happened, and she's like part of the underworld of this, and she's trying to kind of find her way and stop this crime from occurring kind of thing. I really enjoyed the amount of scientific detail that went into this about some of the problems that you would be faced if you did live on a colony in the moon. Like, how do you deal with things that in our day-to-day life on a planet that has oxygen and an atmosphere and all the kind of stuff that we need to survive, like how do some of these problems when placed on a planet that doesn't have any of this, like what do you have to do to make that all work? The thriller section of it itself is good fun, but I think I was definitely here for the background world building, and Andy Weir has a really fun, light-hearted humour to a lot of his writing. I really enjoyed The Martian as well, but I wanted to highlight this one because it's less popular than The Martian. And yeah, generally I think if you're looking for light-hearted sci-fi, this is where to go, and also sci-fi that really leans into the science part of the science fiction. Okay, now one that I have never heard mentioned on anybody else's channel, proper hidden gem kind of one, and this is Love Minus 80 by McIntosh. This is playing around with a sort of a dystopian-esque future, but not fully dystopian, and it's kind of taking our surveillance state social media idea to the nth degree. So we live in a world where people have screens that fly around with them all the time, and the whole point is to try and get as many views as you can, but when you die, you can be basically you can be cryogenically frozen, and then people can pay to resurrect you, and then you become kind of theirs. It's almost like a modern day human slavery idea, and there are these cryogenic wives in inverted commas where if you're pretty and a woman and you die, then men can pay to bring you back and then have you as their wife. So really playing around with sort of horrible feminist dystopian future kind of things. And the main story focuses on a guy who kills a woman in a hit and run, and then finds out that she has been cryogenically frozen, and it's about him going to try and make amends and kind of the conversation with her, and then sort of the world building all around it. It's really spooky and creepy, and it's the kind of sci-fi where because it's this is their everyday life. It's sort of, a lot of the more horrifying aspects of it are like really glossed over, and it's only when you stop and really think about what it would be like to live in this world that you're like, oh, this is awful, and it's a kind of terrible world. But I really enjoyed it. I thought that the love story was very interesting, and I thought that it ended relatively strongly, because some of these sci-fi sort of just peter away, and I quite like this one. So a very much hidden gem, not many people have heard of it, and I think you should totally check it out. And then the final one that I have to talk about is The Psychology of Time Travel by Kate Mascarenhas. As the title suggests, this is about time travel, and it's set in a world where we discovered the ability to travel in time in the 60s, and it is about the kind of ramifications of that. There is a thriller murder mystery aspect to it, but it's also just about how would a world, like what would happen to the world if we discovered this. A really cool feature of this that kind of limits the time travel aspect and makes it, I think, work a lot better than a lot of time travel books out there is that you can only travel within a frame where time travel has been invented. So you can't go back beyond when time travel existed, which I think stops these kind of like, why wouldn't you go back and kill Hitler, like constant loop kind of things. And it really leans into the concept of kind of the determinism of when you know horrible things have happened, you can't stop them, and like talks about some of the more practical aspects of what would it be like if we had time travel in our sort of world right now, including things like tax evasion in time travel, and like when should you be paid and how to deal with that, and like little linguistic features of like when slang is created in the time travel community, like you can't track when it happens because it gets like any idea that happens gets then immediately threaded through all of the timeline because people are jumping around so much. It's just generally really fun and quirky. It follows 3 different timelines, or like major kind of time areas as such, and 3 different main characters, and I really loved all of them, and it's got a wonderful cast of predominantly women, which was really interesting. It has a lot of women scientists, which is always nice to see in sci-fi, and just generally is a really wonderful book for lots of like a very wide diverse range of representation, which I also think is excellent. So that is it from me. Those are 8 sci-fi books that I think are pretty great. I definitely have enough that I could probably do another one of these, so these aren't necessarily my favourites. These are just a collection of sci-fi books I wanted to talk about today. I'm going to be bringing you more of these 8 that are greats, don't worry. I do have a horror one planned soon, probably by the end of October. I have one more book that I want to read before I do that one, and I should have a contemporary romance one out soon. So let me know if you've read any of these or if they've now made it onto your TBR, and that's about it really. Have a wonderful reading week, and I'll chat to you soon. Bye!